Thanks very much, Dawn, and thanks very much to each and every one of you for joining us in this inaugural speaker series on transformative education. And Dawn forgot to mention that we're supposed to do this in 20 minutes. I love the middle of Lent. Now, why? Why would anyone with any kind of sensitivity to the natural environment love that part of spring that is cold and raw and ugly? Why would anyone miss out on the beauty of Easter and choose the middle of Lent instead? As you can well imagine, there's a story that goes along with this selection of my favorite time in the liturgical calendar. February 1976. I was 23 years old. I graduated from college and decided to transform the world by teaching the next generation of young people in a Catholic school. So I also had to work 2 jobs in order to have an apartment and ride the CTA to work. But I did have the love of my life, who, on February 13th, 1976, we were meeting in Bucktown for lunch, because why would you not extend a weekend for high school students by including on President's Weekend an opportunity for faculty to develop in professional development? So we had faculty professional development in the morning, and we were out in time for a late lunch. I was meeting Jim at a restaurant in Bucktown, and we were going to have a great lunch, because then I had to get on the bus and go to Dominican University to teach in a CCD program out there. We were going to meet at the restaurant. So I'm walking down the street, and Bucktown was not quite gentrified at that point in time, on the edge, as they say. And the next thing I knew, someone with a knife mugged me, attacked me. So it stole my purse, threw me down on the sidewalk. And I was so mad. I was so mad that someone would attack me, because I'm a good person. I'm the person who always stood up for the poor. If he would have asked me, I would have given him money. But he didn't even ask. He just attacked me, took a knife out, ripped my purse, ripped my coat with his knife, and then took off. I went to the restaurant. I was like discombobulated. I was absolutely astounded. And Jim met me at the restaurant and said, "What happened? Why are you so white? Why are you shaking?" Because, of course, in my mind, I began thinking about all the violence in the world, about all the victims in the world, about all the people, not just myself, but all the people who, without doing anything to deserve becoming a victim, were victimized, had their lives held by a thread. And I was like shaking, because I was so God. I'd never, ever before been, physically attacked. So I got to the restaurant, and we called the police, and the police came, and the police officer said to me, "Why didn't you have a gun?" So now I'm like mad at the police. I'm like, how could you say something like that? You should be trying to make our streets safer, and having guns it's not a great option to make the streets safer. And so anyway, they took the police report, and they said, you're never going to get any of this back, and make sure that you have, of course, what's in my purse: my driver's license, my keys to my apartment, my checkbook, all my credit cards. Not that, I had any money, but, I had all those things that someone could use. And so then he said, like call your bank, call this, call your credit cards, call that, blah, 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 blah. So you get a string, of things that you have to do after you've been mugged. And you have to do it because otherwise, somebody will do something terrible with all of your financial tools. So Jim, of course, was an attorney and worked for a bank downtown and had a car. So he drove me to the Elston driver's license facility to at least the police officer wrote out the whatever it is, the report, and said you'll be able to use this to get a new driver's license. So we went to the Elston driver's facility and we waited in a line, of course, and we walked around like cattle. And I was like, you can't believe I was just mugged. Why are you making me stand in line? I was just mugged. And people were like, yeah, we've heard this one before. So we wait in line and we get up to the thing, and then of course they say, well, this doesn't prove your identification. So I said, well, why did the police? Well, those guys will say anything, anytime. I was like, oh, this is the bureaucracy working at its best, supporting the victims of violence in our society. So I said, Jim, you know what? Let's just leave this. This is enough now. But I have to get to my next job. Dominican University at that time was hosting a group of it was a high school religious ed program for all the kids that lived in Oak Park and River Forest. And instead of going to their regular parishes for CCD, which was not cool, they decided to put everything at Dominican University and have real professional teachers teaching this program. And then we would actually do real catechesis with the kids. So I said, oh, Jim, I have to get out to Dominican. I have to, prepare. I was going to spend some time preparing. Just, drop me off and I'll prepare and then we'll see what goes next. And I said, I just can't think about this stuff anymore. So he dropped me off at Dominican and I went down into the student lounge to prepare for my lesson for the evening. Little did I know that the class was supposed to be on 1 Corinthians. That's a story of St. Paul's letter to Corinth, the sea town, in which the people in the town are at odds with each other because they're the people who live there normally, but then the people who use the ports, as sailors do, who come in for refreshing themselves after a long journey, and sometimes participating in activities that the people who normally lived in the city didn't think were savory. So there was a lot of dissension in Corinth. There was a big gap between the rich and the poor in Corinth. There was a big social distinction between the people who used the seaports and the people who worked to support that seaport industry and the people who worked in legitimate jobs further up off the coast. It was a town racked by division and violence. And Paul's great letter about love is in that text. When he reminds all the Corinthians and all of us that our Christian response to violence is not anxiety, depression, fear. Our Christian response to violence is forgiveness, peacemaking, gathering people together like we gather at tables like this, at a meal, at a table, where we thank God for all we have. That washed over me as I was preparing for the class. That message of forgiveness, of peacemaking, of our responsibility to focus on the goodness of God and the gifts that we have, of our responsibility to be people who provide for the needs of others, not who only look at their own needs. I found myself refreshed. I found myself transformed. I found myself amazed that the mugging, meeting God's message, can have such a profound effect on my immediate life. and could be such a healing moment. I'll tell you, I taught the most inspired class that night. And it was inspired because I could see within the hearts and minds of those young people that were involved in my course that they also had a lot of hungers. Hungers that I hadn't been able to touch before this evening. And so I saw the love of God transform personal lives and social contexts in a way that I had never experienced before. And I walked out of class that evening overwhelmed with how religious experience could give everyone, could give me such a profound change in my life and in my perspective and in my attitudes. I'd been involved in teaching religion forever and had never had such a deep experience. So then I got kind of weird because I was like, you won't believe what happened to me. And then I would say, well, it all started with being mugged. And people were like, oh, no. And I said, no, honest to God, being mugged was like the beginning of the best thing that happened to me. And then they'd be like, you are strange. But I have to say, to this very day, sometimes when we least expect God's love to flow into our lives, that's exactly what happens. In the vacuum, when we make room, when we're not so full of our own selves and of our own self-importance, we can have room for God to just totally transform those rough edges, those bitternesses, those unforgivable moments that otherwise would never have occurred. Out of that experience, I was ever more committed to really focusing on social injustice, social context. What is the cause of poverty? What is the cause of violence? And I spent most of my life then using education and educational communities to be transformative elements in young people's lives and in old people's lives as well. I think any of us that have been involved in education know that every year, every student, every interaction we have changes us for the better. I remember the first time that I really realized that it wasn't just nice words when people said, I really am grateful for your interaction in my life. I learned as much from my students as they learned from me. When we see what a faith-learning community can be and how it can build up people to maximize the gifts and talents they have, that is like so sweet. So sweet. So I just love being here at Loyola University. I love being at the Gannon Center. It's an opportunity for us to engage in research that's significant, research that can help shape the world to be something better for the future. We engage in study so that our research is informed by the best practices and best thinking that can possibly be there. And we can really engage in that intellectual rigor when we dialogue with each other sincerely and respectfully. And I just love the fact that we also are involved in service learning projects, service learning experiences, in which we take research and great knowledge and we put it together into creating social systems that absolutely make the world a better place for people. So, I am absolutely delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be able to continue my life journey in a way that can support and be supportive of those who want to make the world a better place, to engage in transformative education, and to do it with such fine people as you are. So thank you very much. I want to encourage us to have a small table conversation just for a few minutes, for about 5 minutes, and then we'll open up to Q&A. But if you, at your small table, would like to maybe reflect on something, or some experience that you've had that has had a transformative effect on you or on someone else you know. And then we can maybe share some of that with each other. So thank you very much, and let's hear your good ideas.